Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being part of Globalizing Calgary Tech. This is volume 3 of our discussion series. And I'm Terry Rock. I'm the president and CEO of Platform Calgary. Platform Calgary's mission is empowering people building the next economy. We believe that behind every great innovator is a great community. And our goal is to 10x the impact of Calgary's innovation ecosystem over the next 10 years. In 2021, we'll open the Platform Innovation Center as Calgary's central hub for innovators, featuring over 40 program partners, all focused on working with and serving startups to create that impact. We're excited to continue exploring and learning together as we go on this journey by connecting with innovation leaders around the world, learning lessons, making connections. We all play an important role in taking Calgary and Alberta to the next level and to work together to strengthen and build a more robust startup community. In the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth, we honor and acknowledge Mohkinstsis and the traditional Treaty 7 territory and oral practices of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, the Kainai, the Piikani, as well as the Stoney Nakoda and Tsuut'ina nations. We acknowledge that this territory is home to Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3 within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. Finally, we acknowledge all nations, Indigenous and non, who work, live, play, and innovate and build things on this land, and in so doing, honor and celebrate this territory. We'll be recording today's session to share with those who are not able to join us live. We're all excited to hear insights from Elena Dumitrascu, founder at TerraHub, Nishka Gupta, VP Exploration Production at ARC Financial, Mark Brown, founder at Beta, and Kirsten Stead, co-managing partner at DCVC Bio. What an amazing group of people that all have given us time. They all have interesting connections to Calgary and a lot of insight into what we can do for the future. The discussion will be moderated by Shelley Kuipers, co-founder and co-CEO at the 51, and a member of the Platform Advisory Roundtable, I might add. Today we will be exploring how technology and innovation are impacting industries and creating new pathways for economic growth in all sectors. And to kick off the event, I'd like to welcome Honorable Senator Doug Black. Senator Black is the honorary co-chair of our Platform Advisory Roundtable. He was elected by Albertans as a senator in waiting in 2012 and was appointed to the Senate in January 2013. Prior to serving in the Senate, Senator Black practiced law and served as a board member or advisor to several Canadian businesses. He was appointed to Queen's Counsel in 2002 and was named in 2012 as one of Canada's most influential lawyers by Canadian Lawyer magazine. Senator Black has made tremendous contributions to our province around raising the profile of innovation. Look forward to some opening remarks from Senator Black. Over to you.
Terry, good morning. Thank you very much. I just want to make sure I haven't screwed this up. I haven't. I think I'm live. Well, listen, I want to thank everyone for being part of this call. And as the sun rises, I'm looking out the window now, as the sun's getting to rise on another beautiful day in Alberta, I want to start by thanking each and every one of you for the contributions you're making. The work that you have been doing over the last couple of years, we'll say, maybe a little bit longer, has always been important to the Alberta economy, because diversifying our economy is critical. It is more important today. We saw yesterday with the denial of the presidential permit for the Keystone Pipeline that diversification of this economy in Alberta is more important. And everyone on this call is a central actor in that diversification. And that's why I am so pleased to have the opportunity, to have the privilege actually, to work and to learn with the folks that are on this call, to help where I can in developing what I call Alberta 2.0. And a key part of that is innovation, and a key part of that is startups. That's why I'm lending my voice and what little muscle I still have left to this project. So I want to thank you all for what you're doing, and I want to thank you also for the focus that each of you show in building your businesses, in doing what you do, in meeting the challenges. And it is about focus that I want to quickly focus on this morning, because we know it's all about focus. In building the business or building the culture that we're endeavoring to build here. And we must be successful on this for the reasons that I've said. And while much is happening, my commitment to this organization is to ensure, insofar as I can, that governments have focus to assist us, that is to say the startup culture, where they can, and to back away from endeavoring to assist us where they can't. Governments have trouble with focus. Governments tend to think about peanut butter. We spread whatever expertise, whatever money we have over as many interest groups as we possibly can, because that's the politically appropriate thing to do if you're a politician. That's not what's required here. What's required here is focus to back the winners. And we have winners in this province, both organizationally and corporately. We know who these people are. So, and who these organizations are. And one of them is clearly Platform. So that we have to get behind that to make sure that the vision that has been set forth by Platform and its leaders can be achieved. And my commitment is to do that. So on focus, there is no more appropriate person to talk about and to exemplify focus than the moderator of our panel this morning, Shelley Kuipers. As Terry has indicated, she is one of the co-founders of the 51, which encourages investment and entrepreneurs to come together to encourage access to women-led capital for women-led businesses. Shelley is an exemplary leader, entrepreneur, and mentor. For a number of years now, she has committed herself to starting businesses and supporting others who want to do that, as we're going to see today. We are so lucky to have her in our community, and we are so lucky to have her as part of the Platform Advisory Body. So without further ado, I'm going to call upon our moderator, and I want to underline again, thank you to everyone on this call for what you have done, and let me assure you that as the sun rises in Alberta today, your work is more important. Shelley, take it away, please.
Thank you, Senator. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm really pleased to introduce the guests on our panel this morning. And so I'll just introduce each of them and then we'll get into the discussion. Elena Dumitrescu is the co-founder of TerraHub. As a computer scientist and ecosystem builder, Elena is a driving force in global blockchain adoption. Yes, she is. Previously an executive in software development and sales, Elena built software for the energy and automotive industries in the form of multi-party open network solutions for business spend management, electronic consumer wallets, and e-commerce. Elena lives and works in Calgary and sometimes hangs out in the mountains. Nishka Gupta, VP of Exploration and Production at ARC Financial, is a Vice President at ARC Financial, Canada's largest energy-focused private equity firm. At ARC, she engaged in a deal in evaluating structuring and execution, as well as portfolio management and corporate strategy. Nishka is a professional engineer and has prior experience as a field operations engineer at a major multinational energy company. Nishka has a Bachelor of Arts in Business Administration from Ivey Business School and a Bachelor of Science in Engineering from the Western University in London, Ontario. Nishka currently lives and works in Calgary. Welcome, Nishka. Mark Brown, founder of Beta. Mark is the founder of Beta, run as a distributed team across 3 continents. Beta enables everyone to send and receive digital audio in a clean, simple, and secure way. Built for everyone working with music today. Mark got his start at Murder Records, Canada's premier artist-owned label during the mid-90s. After working at A&R in the legendary London Indie Creation Records, then at Alan McGee's Pop Tones, Mark started his own boutique UK radio promotion company off the back of his success with the Hives. Mark currently lives and works in Stockholm, Sweden, one of my favorite countries. Welcome, Mark. Kirsten Stead, co-manager, partner, DCVC. Kirsten is a co-managing partner at DCVC Bio, where she invests in early stage companies building deep technology platforms that work tirelessly to develop human therapeutics, improve agriculture, food, and build novel businesses in industrial biotechnology. Prior to that, Kirsten was the investment director at Monsanto Growth Ventures, which invested in a similar thesis. Kirsten has founded several companies following her academic career. She holds a PhD in molecular biology, genetics, and an MBA in finance from the University of Alberta. Kirsten currently lives and works in San Francisco, California. Welcome, Kirsten. So good morning, everyone. Really appreciate the opportunity to moderate this discussion, and I'd like to kind of just jump right into it. So where are my panelists? There you guys are. Awesome. Maybe before we dive into the questions, I'd like to kind of hear from you. What is your connection to Calgary? What's the backstory there? Why are you here? Or why do you have a connection to Calgary?
I can start.
Oh, awesome, Mark. Yes, do.
Oh, I'm raising my hand. I grew up in Calgary, and my family still lives there. And even though we're run as a distributed team, our business is based in Alberta. So,
awesome. Okay, cool. Yeah. Elena?
I came to work on a very, very early stage e-wallet before people even knew you could pay for things online with electronic funds. Moved away from Ontario, but really what got me was stepping off the plane, seeing the mountains. As an avid snowboarder, I thought, okay, you know what, this is home. So never really looked back.
Awesome. Mishka?
Yeah, I mean, Calgary's home. I live here, I work here, my family's here. I actually I moved here in 2004 from New Delhi, India with my family. So I mean, this is where I've spent over half my life, and it's home.
Hey, Kirsten, you've got a connection here too, right? Your family's here?
Yeah, so I grew up mostly in Calgary, and my family continues to reside in the area, so Calgary and Canmore.
Awesome. Okay, so you guys are all Calgarians. I am not, but I'm from Alberta, but Calgary is definitely home for me. So let's maybe dive into some of the questions that we had, kind of aligned for this morning. So each of you are working in various sectors: energy, blockchain, the creative industries. How have you seen each of your industries affected and changed where innovation is at the focus? Or, how has technology driven the industry that you're in? It'd be great. So maybe, Nishka, do you want to dive in?
Yeah, you bet. So I'll speak to the energy sector, which is, all of you are aware, has been such a big part of Calgary for the better part of 2 or 3 decades. I work at ARC Financial. They were founded back in 1989, so I've been around for over 30 years investing in the energy space. Depending on who you talk to or what perspective you take, the energy sector is undergoing a bit of a renaissance globally. And maybe that's an understatement, quite the renaissance globally, or is under siege, depending on who you talk to. And because of those two perspectives, I want to speak to it in 2 separate ways. So I'll classify the energy sector into the traditional, which is your oil and gas and fossil fuel based sector, and then which is how 80% of the world's energy is generated. And I'll talk about the emerging energy sector, which is the sector we're all so excited about. And I'll put everything from solar, wind, biofuels, hydrogen, all of the things often referred to as clean energy technologies, quote unquote, and carbon being the main differentiator. So, I mean, there is disruption happening and renaissance happening because of tech across both these sectors. The traditional sector, it's been happening for a while now, and it permeates every part of the sector, whether you're talking subsurface or, with sophisticated core analysis and geomodeling, or you're talking about drilling and completions with big data analytics. So it's happening essentially throughout the old world, or the existing or traditional energy sector, let's call it. What it's doing is it's accomplishing 3 key things. We're moving into a manufacturing style of operations, so maximizing on all kinds of efficiencies and squeezing everything we can out of the assets. We're improving on the environmental performance. Significant leaps have been made in this space. Sophisticated GHG monitoring, physical technology solutions, and we're also improving safety. So those are the key things that technology is helping us accomplish on the traditional side. I mean, on the new side, I don't even have to go into this because the emerging energy sector really is technology. Technology plays such a crucial role to make sure that these companies can demonstrate that the tech works, get the cost curves down, because most of this sector, except for utility scale solar and wind, is really still in the R&D and the demo phase. And Alberta is a great place, and it's definitely punching above its weight class, I would say. I'll give an example of hydrogen, since it's been such a popular topic. The Transition Accelerator published a report, I believe it was last year, and they outlined all the reasons why Alberta is a great place for blue hydrogen, for example. But a lot of work needs to be done in order to realize that dream or vision. So really, technology is not just affecting the old and the new, it's completely transforming both parts of the energy sector.
Awesome, thank you. Mark, do you want to dive in on the music part?
Sure. When I read this question, I sort of laughed because I think but seriously, everybody knows. I've worked in music my whole life, and everybody knows the story that it used to be vinyl records and CDs and cassettes. And then we got into this world of digital music, and it was brutal for years. Revenue was sinking, and you had this thing called the, iTunes, and then piracy. And so it's been a long, long road that a lot of other digital, media businesses have gone through after the music business. But as you all know, if you look down at your phone, chances are you have Spotify or Apple Music. So there's been we're over the pain, I think, really. But then that would be on the consumer layer. And I think what everybody will be interested in here is that behind the scenes, the way the music ecosystem works, it's still very, very old school. And there's a lot of massive problems to solve. So I would say the transition has been very difficult, but there have been positives at the end. But now we're in the wake of the transition to digital, and it's now figuring out what other problems need to be solved. And I think that would be the best summary.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like some of the work that's being done on attribution, right? So how does everyone who's contributing to the actual, creation of the music, get value back to them, right? I think that's one of the biggest challenges for the music industry, but biggest opportunity too.
But that's exactly it. And I'd already written that down for another question, but that's exactly it. That now all these people are listening to more and more and more music. What they've figured out is, we don't really know who should be getting everybody complains that no one's getting paid for, say, a stream on Spotify or something like that, but then they can't figure out who to pay. And I think you're completely correct that that's the next step. Okay, we've solved everything for, the consumer. It's a better way to listen to music. They have access to everything. The idea of a celestial jukebox with every track in the world on your phone, that's great. But as you're saying, now it's like, everything's in an Excel file and somebody's made some typos. What are we going to do about it? So you've summed it up perfectly.
Awesome. Elena, do you want to school us a bit on blockchain and the work that you're doing?
Absolutely. For us, the industry that I'm focusing on is digital identity and digital credentialing, and the pandemic has really moved this industry forwards. I'd say by at least 5 years. It's been nothing but a rush of positive activity and growth. Blockchain provides an immutable way in which identities can be exchanged, and really the foundation for a digital economy. So it's been nothing but growth and up and up and up in our industry for the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's interesting how, the pandemic has really accelerated much of our work, right?
Yeah.
Like we have to be the future today.
we learned that, you know, when the registrar's office is closed because you can't be in person there, and you still need to renew your driver's license, your sticker on your car, your health card, or even access services in a different country. Those are infrastructures that now are being replaced by digital identities and digital networks that facilitate the exchange of that information that, you know, in previous times required showing up face to face, showing, you know, a physical proof of a document. All of that is now being reconsidered, upgraded, and moving towards a digital world.
Yeah, just excellent. Kirsten, you know, here we are in Alberta, you know, heavily energy reliant. Would love to get your perspective around, you know, agriculture and food. You know, what do you see as the opportunity? Like, where are you driving the innovation? Maybe, you know, introduce us to that, and then, you know, kind of link it back to Alberta. And what do you think is the opportunity for the work that you're doing and how we can leverage it?
Yeah, sure. So I'll try and put that in context. So our focus at DCBC Bio is the intersection of deep technology, so whether that's AI, robotics, sort of advanced technology, so non-incremental concepts of human therapeutics, agriculture, and industrial biotechnology. And to give you, just so you understand the context of which, you know, an Alberta problem-solving system is embedded, you know, around, you know, 3 blocks from our office, so 3 square blocks of our office, if we were working out of our office today, there's about 250 to 300 financings per quarter, just within 3 blocks. So financings of brand new companies. And in biotech right now, we're minting billion-dollar companies every week. In fact, we had a $15 billion IPO earlier in December of a Canadian company based in Vancouver. And the reason that works is the network of professional lawyers, people who can bank innovative startups, executives in the industry, et cetera, et cetera. So in order for Alberta to replicate that, I think it's important to try and assemble you know, people who have asymmetric knowledge of a particular problem. And I think, you know, looking back at my time living in Alberta, that is something that was hard for the community to grapple. What are the meaningful problems to solve? And how, and what asymmetric skill sets and mind share do we need to bring together in a small team, right? Because you need a small team to keep an unrealistic idea alive. As Doug intimated at the top of this, you know, how do you get bitumen out of the province without transportation, right? How do you transport that value out of the province without pipeline? And no one should say trains, right? That's a problem. That's a problem worth solving. And it's we need to think more in terms of products and productization, developing products versus, you know, other diversions like sharing IP and things like that, which are not products. So I think that is the big challenge for Alberta. In terms of where I focus, you know, we live in the future here, right? So we have an asymmetric view on what everyone's working on, and we create companies where we see unsolved problems. That's the really simple way to put it, whether that's across those industries. So I think, you know, agriculture is a great goal for the prairies. The trick is getting tied into leaders in the field, becoming networked with other small companies in the space so people understand where the competition is. There's lots of competition for agricultural technologies, and those are typically based in the US and somewhat in Europe. And so that's the challenge, is tying what's happening in the major crops in the US, which have slightly higher value like corn and soy, and translating that into generating increased value in canola and wheat, which has a different sort of cost benefit paradigm. So that's important, but understanding, you know, where they sit in terms of the global ecosystem, as I know the topic of this panel is the most important thing. I'll stop there.
Awesome, thank you. I would really like to kind of dive. So, you you know, I've had the opportunity to kind of, you know, live and work in other places, and kind of bringing that perspective back to Calgary has been super valuable, and be part of different innovation ecosystems, whether it's been in Scandinavia or the UK or the US. And I'd love to kind of hear from each of you now around, well, what do you think are the characteristics, elements, pillars that we need to put in place to create a really successful, strong innovation ecosystem here in Calgary? So what do you think we have, and what do you think is missing? I'd love to hear from each of you guys on that.
Maybe I'll start this one. Everything I do, whether it is supporting entrepreneurs or supporting my industry in the digital identity space, is about innovation. And I do work with an ecosystem of global participants within my industry in that sense. And we always talk about it, whether it, like I said, it's identities or entrepreneurship. It really starts with digital literacy and education. And I see it as education for sort of two groups of individuals: those who build these solutions. So we need tech talent that's capable, that knows how to build really interesting emerging technologies and solve really interesting problems. But the other type of digital literacy comes for those who need to buy these solutions. Those who have the buying power, they need to also be able to have the ability to learn about what's available, why it's important, how it can be a game changer. So for me, growing an innovation ecosystem starts with providing digital literacy to those two groups of users.
Mark, you want to jump in?
Sure, I would definitely back Elena up on the digital literacy thing, because I live in Stockholm, and Shelley, I'm sure as you know, we have amazingly fast internet, and we've had it for years, and the government invested years ago, must be 20 years ago, in fiber. And so the idea of digital literacy from an average person point of view is exceptional. And I think a lot of people credit that as being one thing that has helped Sweden be an innovator in a lot of ways in tech. But like when I think about things that you need in an ecosystem, I'm definitely with Kirsten that it's really about the network. And I think she hit on the key point that you need diverse groups of people who know different pieces of information. Because my experience in the music business, for example, is that the success of an artist is not based on just one thing. You have loads of different players. The artist is at the focus, just like a startup, and the team is the focus, but you need knowledge around you. And I think off the back of that, another thing that's super important is you need to have people, or I think it's super important to have people that have done it before. People talk a lot about you're going to make mistakes or whatever, but even knowing that certain things are possible is exceptionally hard. So when I started growing up in Calgary, I'm like, well, I can't stay here anymore because there's no music industry. And I was forced to leave. Whereas now, 20 years later, it's embarrassing to say, it's a lot better. There's tons of things happening. There's conferences, there's arts organizations, music organizations, Platform is doing things. There's lots more happening. And that means that more and more people can say, oh, well, I don't need to move anywhere. I can go down the street and talk to a friend, or I can reach out to this person who was previously successful with that. And it's that idea that it's possible, and then also meeting people who can tell you how it's possible. It's putting the pieces in place. And then I think the last thing is you've got to have a relentless obsession. And that comes from the founders themselves, that the people doing it, you can't, no matter what advice you get from anybody else, you've got to be relentless in your obsession and driving it forward. So those would be my 3 points.
I have to add to what Mark said. The reason we have such a booming creative industry is thanks to our leader at Platform, Terry Rock. So we're excited to see what he does in tech, like he did for the creative industries. but yes, having a centralized place like Platform, having groups like CDL, A100 that give you mentorship, you know, creating those opportunities for people to learn from those who have been there, done that, and meeting those who have demand for the things that we create is really critical.
I'd just like to follow up on the Terry thing. I actually met him through my music business contacts in Calgary by the Sled Island Festival. So the fact that that's exactly how it works. You meet people who work in different industries, and Elena, you're 100% correct. So I agree, definitely.
Awesome. Kirsten, do you want to build on that? Going back to your original comments, like what do you think is maybe missing from Calgary, or, you know, what would you add to the mix?
Well, I think that, you know, the concept of, I'm just going to say something slightly pessimistic here, but then followed by why. The notion of attracting non-natives here to start is probably not the right, you know, that's been tried by many jurisdictions and has not worked. I think the one thing that Calgary underappreciates and should double down on is tourism. You know, this is how, in part by how the Denver and Boulder ecosystems got built up, right? Because you're attracting sort of young adventurers to the region. I think Calgary really unappreciates and could double down on bringing people through the city to the mountains, and so infrastructure or whatnot there. I know that sounds tangential, but I think it's an important part of bringing people to Calgary. I think it's going to have to be ground up in terms of building the entrepreneurial community up based on the skill sets that are present and can be augmented in the city. You know, I absolutely agree with some of the prior the prior comments about we need better digital education. We should be, you know, tripling, quadrupling comp sci graduates in the local institutions. We should be using AMI as a fantastic institution, the Alberta Institute of Machine Intelligence at the University of Alberta. If you look at Waterloo, right, who has hundreds of comp sci graduates every year, they have a good thoroughfare to Silicon Valley startups and internships and cross-pollination there because of that promotion. And that's the sort of start is to get that sort of cross-pollination between hubs, right? So that people start doing 6-month internships, start turning back over. Some of them will stay, some of them will come back to Calgary. But that's the sort of, I think, focus we need, starting at our institutions. And then, you know, from the top down, looking at the skill set that we have and trying to pick innovative people and hungry people that understand the industries that are core to Alberta's economy today.
Awesome.
I was just going to add one thing to that discussion, Shelley. I think fellow panelists have talked a lot about talent network, which I can't disagree with. Like, that's just so important to have, and resources like Platform and Foresight Accelerator just create such a healthy ecosystem. I just want to add, I think there is a mindset that is required as well, especially from consumers of emerging tech products. So from the energy technology perspective, I think you need those willing guinea pigs, which we actually have in Calgary. We have lots of established businesses, but they need to give a chance to some of the emerging tech. And I heard a couple stories when I first got into the space and started learning about it, of people leaving Calgary, going south of the border or going to Europe because they just couldn't find customers to try their product out. And that just kind of breaks my heart a little bit, because we're creating our own brain drain problem, so that you need those early adopters, which I think we have the adopters. They just need to take a little bit more risk and have that early adopter mindset.
So Nishka, you know, you're one of the only funds that are based in Calgary. What's ARC financing? I mean, traditionally you financed pretty traditional oil and gas businesses. So are you stepping into this fray to fund? By the way, I agree with your comment completely that it's very hard to get the locals in Alberta to both invest in funds that are investing in innovation and also be adopters. So I think definitely that's part of the problem, maybe for a different conversation. But are you guys taking a step into funding some of these things?
That's a really good question, Kirsten, and that's been a question that's been top of mind for the ARC partnership for over 5 years, I want to say. And in the past, we have actually funded businesses on the renewable side. We actually got into it in a pretty big way in the early 2000s. What happened is a lot of those ended up being false starts. So we funded several biofuels technology companies, for example. And because they were false starts and a whole bunch of money was lost, investors tend to get skittish, and they basically start associating that early loss with the space doesn't work. We know now that this time it is different. There is a massive push because we're trying to get to this net zero goal, which is really a behemoth task. And ARC is exploring all of the different verticals on the energy transition side, you name it. We haven't made any significant investments recently in the space, but that is certainly top of mind for the next few investments, and we're looking at it in a very real way.
One thing that's kind of coming to mind for me is how do we democratize access to innovation and participation in the innovation ecosystem? I hear, there are these pockets of innovation, there maybe at the university level, but how do we get beyond the universities into maybe it's the rural areas, maybe it's into other educational institutions to really make sure that the entire ecosystem, everyone living in Alberta and in Calgary is moving forward with an innovation, mindset. Do any of you guys have any comments about that, about just really democratizing participation in the future of what we can?
I just don't think that's the right way to think about it. I mean, Calgary, Alberta, and Canada in general needs to start looking through the lens of the world's competitive and democratizing it, creating clusters where everyone's treated fairly is not the way that companies are built. They're built with a mind that there are lots of competitors, and the velocity of their build has to be competitive with a global product, and they're building products. So I would say focus on creating an unfair advantage in a kernel in one center. But this notion of treating all our, I miss Canada, but treating all of our children fairly and creating clusters, this just does not work.
I look at Shelley's question more like growing access. I come across so many individuals who would like to be an entrepreneur, who would like to take an invention to market. They just don't know how. Yeah. And I think having, sort of street level access to the resources available is step one, which gets me very excited about, platform being our place in Calgary, where now you can just walk down the street and see this center labeled, it's for innovation. And that will give people at least a place to start if they didn't know that one existed before. So having those who are in the innovation sector be aware of each other and be aware of all the resources, and then taking that to every citizen, I think it's really important. And I do see Alberta moving in that direction. And it's very exciting to see. To me, innovation no longer happens just in the university. It's really moving to every citizen to be accessible. So again, kudos to you, Shelley, to Terry, to Senator Black for supporting that transparency and access for everybody to know how to get started. How do you take an idea and make it real, or come up with another idea that's better? Which
I'd like to reinforce both of those comments. That I agree on one hand that it's extremely important that people have and that's what I was trying to get across, that people have an understanding that things are possible, that being a quote unquote entrepreneur, it's sort of there's not one skill set that works in that environment. But then Kirsten is completely right that it's better that people learn early how difficult it is, and that it's a ruthless environment to work in. But if you're the right type of person for it, there's nothing better. And I think it's that balance of letting people know what is possibly involved, and that if they feel they can do it, that they should try it. And that's, you know, just taking a risk and seeing how it goes is not something people know really, in most cases, that it's accessible to them. So I really, the balance of both of those points, I think is super important.
Absolutely. And I just saw Dr. Bob Schultz's comment in the chat. He's been instrumental to helping my company reach out a global market. So thank you, Dr. Bob, and thank you for letting everybody know that you're available for everyone to help connect dots. I have to say, if there's something unique to Alberta, and what's kept me in Alberta is this willingness from everybody to lend a hand and to support each other. And literally, I have goosebumps as I say that, because it brings me great joy to be in a place where that's available. Shelley, I think that's another thing that's making us unique and able to grow this ecosystem exponentially faster than in any other place. Funding, love to see groups like the 51 who are supporting women entrepreneurs. But the one thing that I think could be more of is those tax breaks that we talk about from our government that really would enable a buyer, to Nishka's point. Maybe if there was an incentive for certain organizations to try new tech, maybe if they had a tax break or a program that said, hey, you don't have to take on the full risk. There is additional sort of public funding to support you in that space. And I'm not saying there is none, I'm just saying there could be more, right? So I think that could also go a long way in helping our ecosystem grow fast.
I'll just add really quickly to that one. There was the Alberta Investor Tax Credit, and as someone who has dabbled in the local tech scene and investing in the local tech scene, that was working pretty well. So I'd love to see something like that come back. I know it was taken away because lots was changing with the change in government, but I'd love to see something like that, similar, coming back to the province.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm listening to all of you. I mean, such wisdom here. I think another kind of layer to all of this is telling the stories. It goes back to the possibilities, Mark. Like, if we don't know the stories and we haven't heard the narrative, then we can't be it. And I think that's something that's really lacking here in Calgary, especially, is a platform to tell these stories, right? Who knew about Solium before it transacted? The community knew Benevity much better, but it's like these were, quite often surprises to those that are here in the community that these companies exist and that they've been created here. So what do you think is the role of media, Mark, in kind of helping us imagine what the possibilities are here in Calgary?
In the media, is in the print media and that kind of media.
Any kind of media. Like, I mean, we're seeing that there's a Alberta talk show or podcast. It's the fastest growing one across Canada. It's called Ryan Jesperson. I think it's like Real Talk or something. I think the province is hungry for different media telling different stories. So what do you think is the role of media in helping us realize what the possibilities are here at home?
Well, I think but because the Benevity story, I think that's interesting. I didn't know anything about them, and they're massive. And I think, say from our point of view, we've had press, we got TechCrunch when we got some funding. So that's as big as you can get in our world. And there's a handful, we've had some other Forbes and all this kind of stuff, but then we've never had any local press, and I think it's funny in a local situation, talking about how ensuring that narratives are delivered to everybody. And I think Nishka mentioned something really interesting about the idea that you need people to try out new things. And I think it's that understanding that it's not just startups don't live they don't just sit in the corner and then IPO. There's a lot of stuff going on. And the more people have an understanding of what these companies do and how they play a role in the community and how people can be involved, I think is super important. And I think some of that stuff gets lost at a local level, has been my experience so far. But I think you don't tout something because it's local, but you definitely celebrate things that are working the whole way along, I would say. And I think it's that explaining the journey to people goes back to that idea of giving people examples of how it could work for them.
I want to get even more specific. Like as an example, Shelley, this is a really, really good point. I was actually ashamed of like not knowing who Benevity was, and the first time I heard of it, I'm like, I know all these little companies in the energy space. They're like a tenth of the size, but I don't know what Benevity is, and I don't know what Solium is. So when I first learned about it, I was like, why can the only place I consume that information, like Twitter or LinkedIn, I'm not hearing about it from an established media local source at all. Like an example, I get the Daily World Bulletin every day, great publication, lots of awesome news, but certainly very focused on the energy side. It would be awesome if we could have something like that that focuses on the emerging tech scene. And there's a lot of companies out here. Look at all the companies that CDL has seeded, for example, on the AI blockchain side. Like, it would be so great if there was a publication that focused more holistically on the startup ecosystem in Calgary.
And I totally agree with that, because I think, like, I know nothing about ag tech, zero, but I think it's super interesting because I love hearing about different businesses in tech because there are so many parallels. And I think it doesn't matter if something's from a different industry, there's always a story to learn. And I think, especially in Alberta, that's what you want to be highlighting, is all the similarities and the parallels, because just because, say, Nishka or Kirsten might work in a different industry to me, it doesn't mean that we live in different worlds. There are parallels. And I think in a smaller community relative to bigger markets, it's important that people can see other industries and pull information from those places. So I don't know if that's another thing in that area.
Yeah, I agree.
I can, there's a question in the box on agriculture from Chris Patterson. I think it's Chris from BSF. So hi, Chris. You know, asking about how to promote ag companies. And I think, you know, Calgary does have, you know, Nutrien is centered there, and BASF also has a pretty big presence in Calgary. And I think, you know, developing that ecosystem, those companies probably need to show that they're going to adopt, right? Per Nishka's comment, it's really important they start adopting and acquiring companies. And then once financiers see that that's a good opportunity, that it's an interesting place to put money to work, then entrepreneurs and financiers can get together and start building technology and tools for those companies. That's the reality of how the ecosystem works. We need to see a willingness and hunger for the local companies to be to acquire and work with, you know, and invest in these companies. And then the whole ecosystem starts churning. And then those companies start recruiting executives from those ag companies and so on and so forth. So I think that's where it really starts. So I hope I answered that question.
Awesome. Thank you, Kirsten. Maybe I'll just kind of go back to you, Kirsten, on you had made this comment about go where the funding is. And, you know, there is an appetite for Canadian companies, Canadian founders, innovation with the US financing community. So what's your thoughts around, you know, do you go get the funding? Do you stay here? Do you go south? Do you do a bit of both? What would be your advice to the innovation community here?
So I very strongly, you know, you have to go to where your chances of success are the highest. And because, you know, as an entrepreneur, and there's a couple entrepreneurs on this call, you've got, you know, probably 2 years to know whether you're going to be sinking or swimming. And entrepreneurs, if you're just putting, you know, the ecosystem aside, you've got to really focus on making your opportunities successful.
Yeah.
And so you need to go to the financiers that are excited about your opportunity, to have the expertise and the network that can help you grow, hire people. And if that means you can stay in Calgary, great, but often it means having to make a move, and that's absolutely what you should do. So you're setting yourself at a really big disadvantage to your competitors if you hold back by geography or the type of funding that you restrict yourself to.
I would be remiss if I didn't jump in right after Kirsten, because selfishly, I don't want companies to leave, although I think it's really good advice for entrepreneurs. This is a call to action for investors like ARC Financial. I'll even like point at myself here. This is a call to action to governments for policy, those tax incentives that we're talking about. We can't afford that, and entrepreneurs will do what's best for their companies. So let's make sure that we can give them a really high chance of success here locally. It sounds very kind of hokey, but it's true, because if that brain drain continues, and it's already been happening to a certain extent, like I'm just really worried that like it'll just take us longer to get Calgary to a point where we can have a thriving ecosystem locally. So, you know, it's advice on both sides.
Yeah, it's actually the same advice, right? If the Calgary ecosystem, Alberta ecosystem wants to be that best scaffold for a certain type of entrepreneur, and we shouldn't try and boil the ocean, right? We should decide what we're going to focus on. Then we need to build that scaffold to compete with others, with other ecosystems.
Can I just mention what, sorry to interrupt. On this front, like, you know, I lived in London for 17 years. Now I live in Stockholm. We've got people on 3 different continents. There's also the idea that what does moving mean anymore? You can put yourself in a million places. Like, you know, I'm on this call now, then I'm doing a workshop in Toronto tonight. You know, there are you can do it in many different ways. And you need to be committed to going where the money is and going where the customers are and all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't, there's a lot of paths forward these days. And I think a lot of people think it has to be this way or that way. And the way things are today, especially with COVID, it's insane how much you can get done if you stay up long enough during the day, if you don't sleep. Because there's always an opportunity during that clock. Somebody's always working in our company. And I just think it's a massive, like, if people don't want to leave Calgary, they don't need to anymore. They definitely don't need to, but maybe they have to relocate somewhere temporarily, but they can move back, and then people aren't even going to know that they left. So that's sort of my thought on that, just because we run a distributed team.
I agree with Mark. And, you know, if we look at the title of our get together here to globalize Calgary tech, I have a team that's distributed. I have clients that are global, and I was able to build and meet those clients because of the Calgary ecosystem. So I do think that you can build it here, you can sell it globally, and this network of Albertans will help you, will go the extra mile to help you get there.
Yeah, it's my advice a lot is ask, because there will be people in our community for sure that will help. So, and if they can't help, they'll introduce you to someone that can help. So I completely agree. We are getting a bunch of questions in the Q&A. So I just wanted to kind of bring the panelists' attention to these questions. Brad actually has a great question here. Asymmetrical information. What are the 3 things I can read, listen to, or watch to live the future more? So it'd be great to hear from each of you. If you guys just want to start chiming in on some of these questions, that would be great.
Go work in the industry that you are interested in at a major corporation or a startup in the space, so you learn to understand what that industry's problems are. There's that's you know, that's how it's done here. You know, the world in which we live in, most of the information is what we call gray science. It's not published, it's not in a book. What people are working on is not publicly available anywhere. And so you really need to embed yourself in either a startup in the space or one of the larger players to gain that asymmetric information.
I would just add, talk to people. I know it sounds really cliche, but instead of reading or listening to or trying to find like curated sources of information, there's a wealth of knowledge out there that already exists in your community, outside your community. Connect with people, talk to people. People love talking about themselves. So that's the best way to learn.
And I would highlight, having worked in music for years, no one wants to share any info with anyone.
Yep.
And one of the big things about the tech world, I come from a music background, so I'm non-technical, but it was amazing how much information and how open the whole idea of open source, that people actually want to exchange information and get critical feedback on their thoughts, is completely different to the way it works in the music business. So I agree with Nishka, like, that people are I find personally in tech, are much more willing to say, yeah, no, that's not the way it works. You should think of it this way. Or, yes, you're right, go that direction based on what I know. So I 100% support the idea that you will get good feedback if you will get feedback from reaching out to people. Definitely.
There's a local resource that I love. It's a series of podcasts, video podcasts called Collisions YYC. Really interesting interviews. I highly recommend that. My world, my industry is digital identity. So if you want to know what's coming for all Canadians and all Canadian businesses around how identity will be issued and exchanged in the near future, there's a government organization called DIACC, DIACC. On their website, there's lots of what's coming in banking, in birth certificates, driver's licenses, professional designations, and so on. So that's a great resource. For blockchain news, there's things like CoinDesk, TechCrunch, BetaKit that have really, really good insights into blockchain in many industries beyond identity. So those are just top of mind, a few resources.
Lots more questions here. Cassie has posed a question. What do we need to do to focus growth and ultimately increasing our innovation capacity as a nation? And she's referred to, Canada's rank at 17th and the WIPO index. Do you guys want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, so I think this is the intersection of where I work. Yeah, this has been, long discussed ever since I was a PhD student back in the day. The way to contrast how, so yes, Canada has, a high number of graduate level educated people and a relatively lower sort of innovation number, right? So putting that education to developing novel products. And I think the reason for that is everything that we've discussed, right? Down in Cambridge and the Bay Area, the world is run by people with PhDs, whether you know it or not. And there is an inherent concept that technical fortitude goes hand in hand. I mean, you can learn business, right? And here you're sort of exposed to business, from a very early age, from the start of your career. And so research and development, that viewpoint is much more embedded in corporate governance in general here than it is in Canada. So I think, people need to hire. I know lots of stranded PhDs, right? Because the attitude towards higher education is slightly different in Canada. So hire these people, put them to work solving big problems, I think is step number one.
Anybody else want to chime in? Nope. Okay, we'll jump on. Mike from ATB, how important is the flywheel effect of large tech deals happening in Calgary, resulting in more dollars available to be invested? So I love that question because I've got experience in kind of that flywheel in my career. It'd be great to hear from your experiences or your thoughts on that. Anybody want to chime in?
Well, sure, absolutely. But I'd love to get your thoughts, Shelley, too.
Me too. I was waiting for you
Okay.
to.
Those big exits mean a few things. Definitely put Calgary on the map. Definitely ensure that talent stays here. But more importantly, every single time I've seen a big exit, I've also seen that investment getting re-injected into the local economy in the forms of funding for emerging startups. So it has been, in my opinion, exponentially growing and supporting our tech ecosystem. So that's how I see it. Every time there's a big exit, the founders, the investors reinvest a large portion of that into the economy, and that's wonderful to see.
Yeah. I don't know if Stuart or Connor is on the session today, but I can think back to the founding team and the leadership at Mirac. They did just that. And so that was an energy software company in Calgary. And we actually called it energy software. We didn't call it oil and gas software. But I was with them between 1990 and 1999. And following that transaction was a huge, kind of a huge catalyst event for many people from that organization to go out and start their own companies, to do things with the capital that they accrued during that transaction. And nobody kind of knows about that story. And that was in the 90s. And that transaction happened in 1999 in the energy industry, coupled with technology. And so I think, Calgary has been doing this for some time, but I really do believe that, we're not telling these stories. They're not widely known or appreciated. Okay. Interested in ideas need to talent, interested in ideas need to talent pipeline, challenges, wins, youth, talent attraction, retention. So Gina's thrown up some thoughts here. Any ideas or thoughts from our panelists?
So around talent growth goes back to education and having to do more at our universities and colleges, and actually not even just limited to universities and colleges. There's lots of emerging tech education organizations in our province that are helping people reskill or just upskill or skill period in the tech space. So I would answer that question with I'm already seeing in the last few years a huge growth in this area, and I know that it's not stopping. It's going to continue to grow. Around talent attraction, bragging about our stories and the type of tech we're building here, I think will help attract talent from elsewhere. Other things, the work that Calgary Economic Development is doing to really highlight Calgary as a beautiful, clean city, mountains close by, very educated population. Those are very good initiatives, in my opinion, for talent attraction from elsewhere.
I really also thought, Kirsten said that earlier about the tourism thing. I think that is certainly in Alberta is a brilliant idea, because I agree. Like, I love coming back. I love it. And I think it's not, like I started the music business in Halifax, and it was a small, isolated place. And I think in some ways, the fact that it was like that created the right environment to make a lot of independent music in the 90s very popular. And I think Alberta, the fact that it sits sort of away from everything else, yet is perfectly positioned within North America and is so beautiful, people don't, Kirsten, you might not like this, but people don't need to live in the Bay Area anymore or whatever, or, that's up for debate, but people are moving to different places, and the possibility that you can create what you want to create in the place you want to create it and that place can be Calgary, is a great way to go about it. So I definitely agree with all the talk of promoting Alberta as a great place to live as a way into that, for sure.
Yeah, I think.
What about even adding? Go ahead, Kristen.
Sorry, I was going to say we need to draw attention. There are types of companies that have labs and shops that you physically need to be present. For right? It's not all software out there.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So if you're an ag company, you need a greenhouse, you have people in the lab, you're working on a human therapeutic, you have people in the lab, you're working on a robotic system. So there is a physical aspect and also a network aspect to being in a location that is very hard to replicate in a distributed environment.
And to be fair, I had built up a massive network before I left.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
so that's the other thing. I'm oversimplifying something. I had to leave Calgary because there was no network. I built up a network, and now I'm bringing that back, if that makes sense. So I 100% agree. You can't build a network remotely, really. I agree, definitely. Sorry.
And like, I just wanted to add the whole hard tech versus soft tech, right? Like, there's been a lot of VC money in the last little while that's gone to soft tech. Software was majority of financings in 2019 in the US. You got the biotech companies, energy tech, which is something that Calgary is trying to curate and develop, requires a lot of capital, requires those labs like Kirsten was talking about, test centers, some of which we already have. We need more of that. So that resource, that education piece, what Elena talked about, but also just those resources for people to physically test their theories, and then those customers, someone that'll adopt their solution to a problem. Like that's just so critical, especially on the energy transition side.
I think that's super interesting based on what Kirsten said about not boiling the ocean, that if you do need that infrastructure, it becomes very difficult that there needs to be a consensus within the ecosystem where to focus on investment for labs and all the things that you're discussing. So I think like that's the other thing, that for industries that do require heavy investment and heavy support, it becomes a situation where people need to be in consensus that they're going to focus their money in that area. Otherwise, you end up in that situation that Kirsten's referring to, that people aren't focused, and then you lose that momentum that you could gain from everybody focusing on one thing. So that's super interesting to me.
Mike Lake has just posted a question here around on the PhDs. Kirsten, I see you're typing an answer. That's awesome.
I can answer it verbally. Yeah, so the question is, do we need to have PhDs work on more, this is a question that's been asked for a long time, on ambitious and relevant advancements. So I don't think so. People that have, PhD is an award for discovering something novel to humankind. It's not a process necessarily. So what you're hiring there is the ability to solve hard problems, to work diligently to solve a problem that no one has the answer to. That's the skill set you're hiring. It is irrelevant what they worked on before, almost. It's the ability to learn new things that you're hiring. And in Canada, compared to the US, I said this already, but I'll emphasize it again. There's this concept that, oh, they don't know business, right? Oh, well, we need them to have some sort of business education. And that's just, the business side is hiring them and getting them to work on a problem. That is not the difficult side to learn, but this problem set of hiring a deep engineer or a physicist or a biotech person and pairing that with someone from a PhD in AI, right? That's almost 100% of the companies we fund are a set of founders that are a PhD in biotech, PhD in AI, PhD in robotics, combined together to solve a problem because they've all existed or they have some insight into a particular industry. So yeah, it's not important what they worked on. I think that transition from academia to industry is more integrated in the US in a way that I cannot emphasize enough, whereas it's too separate in Canada. And so that's how we need to bridge the gap, is to have industry do more hiring and have universities promote hiring instead of just telling their PhD students that their only course is in academia.
Calgary's energy companies, and I'm talking about traditional energy companies here because there's been a lot, right, in the past, are frankly run by engineers and geologists. So we do have a culture of technical people running the industry. So I think like I'm not so worried about getting PhDs to focus more on advancements. I think they're already doing that. I think the question is we need to get these techs to scale and commercialize. Like that's the phase we need to focus on. There is tech out there. We just need to support what is already existing and get it to commercialization and scale. That's the key challenge. It's like a lot of these companies are facing that valley of death, and we just need to get them over the hump.
Nishka, your volunteering financing sounds like.
I mean, if I had it all, I would. That's what I would do all day long.
Kirsten, we got another question here for you. They're just coming fast and furious.
Can you explain more how the transition from academia to industry is more integrated in the US? It's a really simple answer. US companies are just very, very active hiring talent with advanced degrees. Whereas, and I have lived in multiple countries, and this is a very Canadian thing for some reason, businesses, and oil and gas is no exception here, think somehow that people with a PhD are somehow lacking business acumen. There's just an integrated, accepted mindset about this, whereas in the US that doesn't exist. So almost all the executive of most technology companies are run by people with advanced degrees. If you look within the ranks of senior leadership, they're all filled with people with advanced degrees. And so they have there's an active, in hot labs in the US, if you're working on a relevant space like protein structure design, or if you're an artificial intelligence lab, or if you're in any area, you'll be hired before you're finished. So it's not unusual for companies to go in and solicit second-year PhD students. And they're just very aggressive in hiring talent out of universities.
I do have to say it also varies by industry. If we're talking back to just pure digital, you don't even have to have a university degree as long as you know that domain really, really well. So yeah, it really depends. I totally get what Kirsten is saying, where if you are in medical field or, deep engineering and so on, yes, you must have that knowledge, but certain things you can just learn on your own. And in my space, there are lots of folks who never went to any kind of post-secondary that are in leadership positions in high, thought leadership roles, and that also works.
Yeah. Well, and you're very much in kind of a democratized space, right? That's the whole purpose of the blockchain, is that it's built by many, right? It's not built by.
That's right.
Not built by the expert. We've got another question up here. You guys can see it. Does the panel think that the Alberta ecosystem at a, kind of more broadly is, we've got that peanut butter support or statement again, are we not focusing? Are we focusing on those that are going the fastest? What's your perspective on that? Does there need to be a stage focus? Does there need to be a sector focus? What are your thoughts?
Well, I've seen sort of vertical focuses on various industries and the clustering around that. I do think that some industries definitely need that clustering where talent and demand meet. So I do believe there's value in that. I've also seen investors that have very specific portfolios where they'd only invest in a specific type of vertical or industry. So they also need that clustering. But I think Alberta as a whole should support innovation regardless of a particular vertical or cluster. I can't think if my industry has a particular cluster or specific, vertical focus, but it is an emerging industry, and it's an industry that's going to affect all Canadians. So I'd feel horrible if Alberta didn't support companies like mine. And I'm glad that there is support for companies like mine, even though I sort of fit in a non-traditional Alberta type industry.
Awesome.
It's a tough question, right? Because, we talked about focus in the beginning. Senator did a really good job of trying to say, well, we can't just be sprinkling because it doesn't get anyone anywhere. We need to focus. But, I totally hear Elena as well. There is many things that Alberta could be good at, and we're already seeing those local ecosystems emerge. So can you really put all your eggs in one basket? In fact, that's what we're trying to avoid. One more time, right? We're trying to diversify. We want to sprinkle the love, but I do think that an evaluation of where our strengths are is important. Like, what are our strengths? Where are the things that we're naturally strongest? And a little bit of focus in those areas will help. And other things will, this is like that flywheel effect a little bit, not quite the exact same thing, but the supporting industries will happen around an ecosystem that's already thriving, instead of trying to, go 20% of this, 20% of this, 20% of this. What are the things that we can get done with X amount of resources? We have good chance of success. Let's focus there. And when things are thriving, when employment is at a high, when the city is doing well and people are flocking here, everything else will build from there.
Okay, I think we're getting close to wrapping up. So I would really love to hear kind of your each individual call to action around kind of the topics or kind of the broader agenda that we're trying to affect. So can each of you chime in on, what is your call to action for your industry or for the innovation community more broadly for Calgary?
I would say those of us who are in the tech space, drop the technical jargon, make what it is that you're working on easily understandable to all. That would be one. And then call to action to our Alberta community is keep doing what you're doing. You're on the right path. We just need more of it.
Mine would just be to talk to people that aren't in your immediate network. Just try to expand your horizons. There's a lot more going on out there. And I'm talking from experience. Like, I was pretty disheartened about 2 or 3 years ago. I was like, there's nothing else happening in Calgary. And then you talk to all these people and it's actually super exciting, the things that are happening, the startups, the accelerators. So just talk to people that aren't in your bubble, and that'll propel you to other things.
I'm going to say that people just need to stay positive. It sounds ridiculous, but being on a couple of these calls before and talking to people, there's always, well, it comes up a lot that there's something is lacking or this, or we're missing this. And I get that there's missing puzzle pieces all the time, but I think it's always better to be focusing on what there is and taking those things and attracting the things that you need, or figuring out you don't need the things you thought you needed. So it's that level of positivity, because there is a lot going on. There's a lot of smart people. There's a lot of interesting businesses. There's big businesses, small businesses across the landscape of industries. And so just being positive about what's going on and not spending time thinking, oh, we're missing this or we're missing that, would be my big point, call to action for everyone.
Awesome. Love it.
Yeah, I agree with that, Mark. I would say my call to action is for all people in your ecosystem that are involved in the innovation company startup ecosystem. You're a consultant, you're at Platform Calgary, you're at economic development. Stop talking about innovation and start a company. Go and talk to individuals who are in industries that are local, learn what the problems are, and figure out what product to build to solve that problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. Yeah. And my call to action is get involved. like you're saying, stop talking about the problem. Let's seek out the possibilities and the solutions and get involved. So if that means, you know, investing in that company that you've been talking to, even if it's a small amount of capital, if it means supporting an entrepreneur, starting a company, like get involved and be part of the solution. There's so much opportunity. Hey, Terry.
I'm back.
You're back. Awesome. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank all the panelists for joining us this morning and for your insights. Yeah, I still have some connections in the music industry. So, you know, when we can follow that up when we're back in real life. You know, what's really interesting about some of this stuff is how all the network matters so much. Connected with Mark when we saw like Beta getting a financing, this Calgary company we've never heard of. Turns out he lives in Stockholm. We're now in the process with Mark and others of working on seeing if we could create a tech accelerator that combines the music industry and our tech scene. And we've got the National Music Center here. We've got great, amazing festivals. We're just exploring that. But as out of that, because one of our advisors was getting her passport renewed, she's a French national in France, that we got connected with the French embassy. And now we have 2 creative industry focused startups coming to Calgary to participate in our Junction program that starts this April. And just all of that is because of the work that we've been doing. So thank you all for bringing these insights. I'm going to share a couple of ideas. I mean, Shelley, we're super inspired by your work. Thank you for what you've been doing and talking about how 51% of the population is going to be controlling capital investment in the near future. And we absolutely need to figure out and work together to bring that capital to bear and to support diversifying not only the industries, but how we run and lead and invest in our industries. I think that's really crucial. So thank you for that leadership and for being here with us today. Earlier this week, I had the opportunity to listen to Invest Like the Best podcast. Really one of my favorites, Patrick O'Shaughnessy. And he interviewed Claire Cormier-Fielke. I'm sure I'm messing that up, but Claire is an executive in Heinz, was a track and field star in the US, and now really is at the intersection of real estate and tech and just doing amazing things. She had this line, and I wish I had this line, but it's hers, and so I'm crediting her, which is that a city is an API for industry. A city is an API for industry, meaning that industry thrives when you build these connections, you can plug in all the pieces. And I think that we've got a city whose API was really focused on growing one of the most successful ecosystems which was in energy, oil, and gas. So how do we then take those API pieces that we have, that exist, and convert that into something that will create a tech sector that thrives and grows? And I think that's the mission that we're all on. We're Platform Calgary, and my motivating thought for 2021 is how platformy can platform be? How can the leaders that are in this room plug into what we're doing and then create tremendous impact? Where most great platforms, the vast majority of the value is created by the people who work on the platform, not the platform itself. So that really, for us, is focused. Mark, you talked about relentless obsession as one of the core things. So if we're relentlessly obsessed about anything, it is about supporting people like you in this to get the most out of what Calgary has to offer. And we talked a lot about core infrastructure, which is not just digital, but also people and talent and all those pieces. And so we have to recognize that what we're actually doing right now is building that core infrastructure in our city. So I thought this was a fantastic conversation. Thank you for bouncing off of each other, exploring things, bringing your wisdom to this joint effort of building Calgary to be what it can be. So it's not only for us, but that we connect globally. Special thanks to Mark and Kirsten for your interest in supporting what's happening here in your old hometown. We really sincerely appreciate that. And now to look forward, we are already in planning for volume 4, 5, and 6 for this series. If in the community, those attending, if you have any topics that you would like us to cover, please feel free to share them in the chat or email us, whatever you'd like. If you'd like to be a panelist, you think you have something to say, we'd be glad to hear that. Our next series, volume 4, is going to be on February the 25th. Same time, 8 to 9:30. We're going to have people, experts and tech leaders from innovation centers around the world. 2021 is the year that Calgary gets its innovation center. We're going to hear from people who have set up successful innovation centers around the world. We're excited to have confirmed folks from Frankfurt already, and we're continuing to build that. One of the most interesting examples of an innovation center is Tech Quartier, which is really focused on converting Frankfurt into a fintech leader. You'll receive the link to RSVP for this event early next week, along with a video recording of this event if you'd like to share it with others. Thank you so much for joining us bright and early in your workday. Please continue to stay tuned. Please reach out and share your thoughts with us. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again next month. Thanks.